Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Reading Room. You're back with Mark Reid, and I'm here with Rodney from Tell Me More. And Rodney, welcome,
Yes.
welcome.
Good to
It's
be
your
here.
first time. Oh, yeah, it's your first time on here. You reached out to me, and I was glad you did. I checked out your channel, Tell Me More. So you do questioning and just sort of talking to people
Mhm.
about random things, really, which I love. And you've had some big names. You've had
Yeah.
Amarià, you've had Professor Dave. So what secret cabal are you part of that's getting all these guests on your channel?
I honestly don't know how it happened. Because like the very when I started to do it, I was like, okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna email, like just cold email, like people who
Mhm.
are like either doctorate students or postdoctorate students, or like lecturers or teachers assistants at college campuses, because they're going to have expertise and
Right.
they probably won't mind answering questions and stuff. And I was like, I might just go ahead and shoot some of these like big YouTube channels with a
Mm.
lot of knowledge. I'll shoot them an email and see what happens. um Arn was the first one to reply, and he was
Okay.
like, okay, yeah, sure, yeah, let's do it. He's and like within a week he was like, hey, yeah, let's do it on this day and at this time, and we're good to go. And I was like, damn. And that was my very first video. So I
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
come out swinging with that one.
And you've only been sort of going 6 months or so, and you've had other big names on, and I really liked the interviews. They were really about, but you're focused on um just sort of pulling knowledge out of people, which I do
Mhm.
like. It was sort of talking to Aaron about his genetics and phylogeny and things like that. Professor Dave about his sort of forays into the wild world of pseudoscience, which I certainly have. When you said I emailed all these doctorate people, I'm like, hey, that's not me, Rodney. That I don't know
Well, yeah, I
anything
mean,
about anything.
like my friend Alex, who's been on, she's got her
Mhm.
bachelor's in behavioral psychology,
Yes.
and she got a focus on behaviorism, and she's working on her master's right now. And so
Mm.
like I talk to her very frequently, and so we even play video games together all the time, and so I have her on. If I'm like feeling like there's a lull in guests or whatever, and
Yeah.
like I'll have her on as well. But no, like I've hit up Doc Dino, I've hit up Eric from Skeptics and
Yeah, I saw
Scoundrels.
Doc Dino on there. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like I don't want to just like hit the
Mm.
super intellectuals or what have you, or however people view them really.
Hey,
Uh,
hey,
I
don't say Doc isn't super intellectual. Come on now. No, I know Doc really well. I'm just trying to hassle him,
yeah.
give him a backhand compliment. Yeah,
But
no, sorry,
I
go
do
ahead.
want to like I do want to like reach out to people who like do something very frequently or as close to day to day as it gets, and like reach out to them and pick their brains for bits and pieces as well. Like basically I know that I don't know. So I
Mm,
want to know. And so I ask people who know so that I can learn. And I want to share that with anybody else who might feel the same way, but doesn't have
mm.
the wherewithal, the gumption, or the time even to do what I'm doing. So if they
Right.
happen to stumble across one of my videos and they're like, "Oh man, I was wondering about that too," and then
Mm.
there you go.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I don't think like people talk about sort of, oh, I don't know anything, and I joke around about it. But I think that everybody sort of has certain things that they are good at, and certain things they're bad at. And
Mhm.
it's like when people say, oh, it's an unskilled job, and I feel like saying, look, no job is unskilled. It doesn't exist. Like
Right.
if you have a job, you're skilled at something. So I don't like to sort of go, well, they like, because a lot of these people will go, oh, they don't have a degree, I don't want to talk to them. And I don't,
Right.
I've seen some pretty genuine wisdom come from people that don't have degrees and don't have these high accolades. So
Mhm.
I really I don't want to be like that. So I do appreciate that, and I really appreciate you coming and sort of inviting me to talk. I really do appreciate it. It's been hectic this weekend. I was on a Kentucky Atheist my last night,
Oh,
and
oh yeah, yeah,
did
yeah.
a debate before that. So it's actually ramping up, which I love. It keeps me out of trouble. It keeps me doing what I enjoy. It's fantastic. I love it. So, but thank you. I really
Yeah.
appreciate you contacting me.
Yeah, I mean, it was like whenever I had first met Eric, I met him on Doc Dino's channel. He was having an open mic, and I had jumped in to talk a little bit about. I think it was Kent Hovind they were covering, and I know a little
Yeah.
bit about Kent Hovind.
Unfortunately,
So
yeah.
and so I jumped in there, and Eric, like, he was very intellectual. The way he
Yeah.
spoke was very attractive. So I was like, hey man, I shot him an email like as soon as the stream ended. I was like, hey dude, like, I like the way you handle yourself. I'd like to
Mhm.
talk to you. You seem real intellectual. And so, like, I was like, I want to talk to you about, intellectual honesty, dishonesty, and intellectual integrity, and like really just dive into
Right.
what
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is, and how we can like look for it or exhibit it. And so, we did that. And it was much the same with you. Like, I think the first I had seen of you was also on Doc Dino's channel.
Possibly.
And then again on, oh, it was, I don't know if it was a Dapper Dino thing or if it
I doubt
was,
it. I've never
no.
been on Dapper Dinos. Yeah.
Okay. I can't remember the next place I saw you, but I was like, oh, he's that guy from Doc's channel. And so
Mhm.
like I started listening to you, and then I found your channel and I subbed to it, and like I see you on Matters Now a lot. And so like I was like, I really need to reach out to him. And then it just kept on slipping my mind. And then finally I was like, no, I'm gonna shoot him an email real quick.
Yeah, yeah. And I must admit I wasn't the best on replying either. I was kind of
Oh,
busy and trying to
it's
shoot them
fine.
back, and we're trying to line it back. But I'm glad you persisted, because yeah, I think yeah, I've been on a lot of channels. I probably couldn't even
Hmm.
pin down where I've been. I tend to get around a little bit. So but no, it's been great, and I'm
Hmm.
glad that we're here. But we're talking, I think you want to talk about logical fallacies and things like that.
Specifically logical fallacies in creationist arguments. And
Okay.
and I find that very, like, I wanted to focus on that a lot because, like, even though I don't want my channel to only focus on the creationist side of it, in the short time I've been doing this, I have found out that no matter which field of science I try to stick my nose in, there's some kind of creationist mumbo jumbo in the works, or trying to muddy the water in the way of pseudoscience or misrepresentation, or just straight up science denial in that field, whether it be biology, chemistry, astrophysics. It's nuts. Like, every time I turn around, there's some kind of, if it's not like Christian young earth creationist, then it might be Muslim creationist. It might be the 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 Christian sects that people aren't so sure are Christian, like the Catholics or the Seventh Day Adventists or the LDS, right?
Mm,
Or even Jehovah's Witnesses. And so, people will be like, they're Christian-esque.
mhm.
Uh, but yeah, like a lot of
Yeah.
people
Latter-day
seem to
Saints
come
as well.
from,
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
people seem to come from religious circles with just like science denial or pseudoscience, or just being like, oh,
Sure.
that's a straight up lie, or it's a conspiracy to hide God. And so I find, since it's such a ubiquitous thing across all these different fields, it's a good place to kind of like focus on where their flaws are.
Well, so I think starting with sort of logical fallacies, the first thing you've got to
Hmm.
realize is it only really applies to deductive arguments.
Yeah.
So places where people propositionally are saying if X, therefore Y, right? So
Right.
this kind of deductive kind
Hmm.
of thing. There's other types of arguments like inductive, like, oh, we've seen, when we do this, this happens, and therefore when we'll do it in the future, we inductively say it would happen. And logical
Hmm.
fallacies don't really apply to them. They kind of overlap, but that's not really applicable. There's
Hmm.
also abductive, which is saying, like, for instance, if a doctor diagnoses this symptom, and says, well, there's a high probability that this is the disease kind of thing. That's an abductive argument. It's not a cause then effect like inductive. It's kind of, hey, we see all of these things. There is the highest probability, the most likely to be this kind of thing. So logical fallacies only really apply to deductive arguments. But that's great because, with the sort of absolutist mentality that Christians and other theists have, they can't rely on deductive arguments. They don't go in for induction a lot. They say, hey, because of this, God definitely does exist kind of thing. That's the ones that they go for. So it kind of works out well. The other thing I want to say about fallacies is what you've got to understand is, and I'll start with a great one, and I'll start with this up front, the fallacy. I don't know if you ever heard about that before.
Yeah.
Right. So the fallacy basically says just because somebody makes a fallacy doesn't mean that they're necessarily wrong. So don't forget, we're talking about deduction here. So if I make a propositional step, I say, hey, if they make a fallacy, therefore they are wrong. That itself is a fallacy, right? That's not necessarily true. I could make a fallacy and say, hey, well, I'm going to make a circular argument or something. I'm going to say that God exists because the universe, because of the Bible, I know is true because of God. Circular argument, right? That's a fallacy.
Yeah.
However,
that's actually one of the ones that I have here.
Fantastic.
That exact argument.
We've covered it already. Move on. No, but the thing is, you could be making a circular argument, but you could still, for other reasons entirely, be right that a God exists, right? So you could be correct, but your logic is wrong. How you arrived at, you could make an absolute guess. You could go, hey, I guess that, Rodney owns a red car. Now, it's a fallacy because you've got no actual chain of logic to back that up. But I could be right. I could be absolutely right. I
have owned a red car.
Right. But just say you did own a red car. It's not a good argument. It's a fallacious argument.
Yeah.
Or if I say, hey, because he's got a red shirt, then he must own a red car. Right. It's a fallacious argument. I think the argument would be like there's one that's a small sample size kind of thing. Like it's not a good argument, but that doesn't mean I'm necessarily wrong.
Yeah.
So when people think about fallacies and someone says, oh, that's a fallacy, you don't necessarily say, well, he's automatically wrong. But what you should do is reject that particular argument, right? Just basically say, hey, but that is not a good argument. It doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong, but I cannot accept that as a good reason because it's not a good argument. Now, there's two types of fallacies. There's formal and informal fallacies. And do you know the difference between them?
This is the first I've ever heard of that.
Okay, so arguments fall into sort of two different types, like formal and informal, and they're sort of referred to as validity and soundness. And so the validity or the formal structure refers to the actual logical structure of the argument, right? So there's a formal fallacy. What's a formal fallacy? Affirming the consequent, right? So what that means is you say affirming the consequent is kind of saying if a God exists, he would create a universe. A universe exists, therefore there is a God.
Okay.
Right. It's a problem with the actual logical structure of it, kind of thing. Right. The logical structure. So the problem is that the logic does not sort of follow, or in this case, it does not lead to the conclusion that you're making in structure. An informal fallacy is one to do with soundness, which means the information contained within. An informal fallacy, there's no problem with the logical structure. So an example of that would be a sort of begging the question, for instance. Okay. So if you say, God created morality, therefore, there is a God or whatever. Maybe morality is absolute. Absolute morality must have been created by a God, therefore there is. You get what I'm saying? You're assuming information that has not actually been demonstrated. Now, there may be nothing wrong with the logical structure, because the logical structure is sort of saying, sort of this is the structure of that argument. The problem is with the things that you've put in it. In the case of begging a question, you're basically assuming facts that haven't been demonstrated. You're basically saying, hey, it is the case that this is a result of God, therefore God exists. So the problem is that you haven't actually shown that claim that this thing derives from some kind of divinity to be sound, to be actually demonstrated in reality. But there's no problem with the logic. So just because an argument is valid does not in fact mean it's sound.
Okay. So so somebody, let's say somebody makes a formal fallacy, and to take it a step further, you're in a debate against creationists. They make a formal fallacy with one of their arguments, and you pointed out, like you will, well, there's a problem with your argument. Here's the problem with your argument. How do you deal with them coming back to I guess any argument, wouldn't matter if it's formal or informal, but how do you deal with them coming back to an argument that you've already pointed out the fallaciousness of the argument? Where, like, do you keep on harping on where the fallacy is, or do you try and reason with them?
No, I think sort of pointing out the fallacy, and something you've got to remember about debate is you're not necessarily explaining where it's fallacious to your opponent. You're explaining where it's fallacious to the audience. So I find a lot that analogies help. Like, sort of, so I can say, hey, that's affirming the consequent, and nobody will know what the hell I'm talking about. but like, I used an example of affirming the consequent. So you can sort of say, hey, if I said, if it rains, the street would be wet. The street is wet, therefore it's rained. That's fallacious, because it could have been sprinklers could have come on. Somebody could have overturned a water truck on the highway. There can be other reasons why the street's wet apart from it raining. So that's a fallacious argument. And so you try to explain things in a way that people will understand. And I think Matt Delahunty's talked about this. Like, he tries to avoid the sort of Latin names, like I mean, most people won't understand affirming the consequent,
or ad hoc,
or modus tollens kind of thing, and all this language around it. But when you actually talk to people in things that they understand, and you know what, it reminds me a lot. And I was talking to Kentucky Atheist about this in my background in sort of IT tech support that I've done in the past, right? Telling somebody that they're having packet loss isn't going to help them, right? That it doesn't let them understand. You've got to talk to them. Right, exactly. You have to talk to them in sort of things they understand. So if you're saying, hey, your system's like sending the information, and part of it's getting lost on the way, it's got veering off and it's not getting there, therefore it's taking ages for you to get the information, kind of thing, because your requests for information are getting lost in the mail. Then they start to understand what you're talking about. You've got to be able to talk in terms that people are actually understanding.
Robin just brought up the very first one on the list too that I have up here, which is arguments from ignorance. And like you had said before, that like, just because somebody makes a fallacy does not necessarily mean that they are incorrect.
Correct.
And I feel like at least in the instances where I've seen in the past week arguments from ignorance, it is almost always actually just incorrect, where they don't know the information, they don't understand. Like the example that I have here is that it says scientists haven't explained how life originated, therefore creation must be true. And
Robin's right, and she put personal incredulity there. So those kind of overlap a little bit. Because sometimes it's sort of both of them going on. It's kind of this fallacy where they say, hey, so the argument from ignorance is basically
I
We
don't
don't know
understand,
what.
so it's wrong.
No, that's personal incredulity, really, because
Okay.
usually I don't understand means that they don't understand or, get how this could have happened in
Yeah.
such a way. So they're sort of
Like most of the
incredulous.
personal incredulity I saw in like they are extraordinarily similar now as you pointed out, because where I see like I don't understand it, therefore I'm gonna believe
Yeah,
what my creationist thing. Whereas
right,
like with personal incredulity, it's like that seems absurd to me. So I'm gonna go with something that doesn't seem absurd to me, which would seem
right.
absurd to most everybody else, it seems.
Well, the appeal to or the argument from ignorance is more you can't explain
Yeah, you
how
don't
this
have an
works.
explanation.
Right,
Okay.
you don't have an explanation at all. It's kind of like when maybe a presuppositionalist and maybe Darth
Mhm.
Dawkins would say, "Well, what's your foundation for this? If you don't have a foundation, then it must be God." It's like, well, even if I had no idea how anything worked, it
Mhm.
doesn't make a God actually any better of an explanation. It's
Yeah, there's
kind
no
of
parsimony in that.
well, I mean, I was talking to a theist and they're a Christian and they sort of said, "Oh, well, you don't know where life came from." And it's like, well, the thing is, it's sort of, well, if we don't know where life came from, it doesn't mean you get to say a God. Like,
Right.
even if you say, "Hey, it can't be natural," just say we prove it can't be natural. Um,
Mhm.
it still could be aliens. It still could be
Yeah.
magic. It still could be all of these other things.
Mhm.
Just because we don't know doesn't mean that it makes it a god. It just doesn't.
Right.
You have to have supporting evidence for your god, and not just, well, you don't know.
Right.
That is not a good reason.
And another thing with that, I feel like maybe they see it the other way around there as well, where like if an
I say,
atheist or a person who doesn't believe in a god or their god,
"Hmm,
they see it as, well, you don't understand my God, or you can't see how my God did this, so you're just ignorant of the ways of God. And I
well,
used to make an argument kind of like that, as a creationist and an apologist, where I would tell people, just because you don't understand the way God did it doesn't mean that he could not have done it. Our minds don't work like God's mind does. So we may not understand why God did something or how he did something, but because it's here, we know he did it. And
but
that's an assumption.
not many people are making deductive arguments that it cannot
Mhm.
be a god, right? So,
Okay.
um,
Okay. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think, yeah, so when you're sort of saying, "Hey, it must be God because of this deductive argument," you don't know how it was created, so it must be a God, and you're making that deductive argument. That fallacy would apply. But not many atheists are saying, "Hey, we know it is not a God. It cannot be a God
Yeah.
deductively." They're not making that assertion, so
Mhm.
that fallacy wouldn't apply to them necessarily. It would be fine if the Christian said, "Hey, I'll make a sort of abduct garment. It was probably God," but that's not what they're doing. That is not what they are doing. They are saying it's definitely God because of this deductive argument. And one of those may be, well, you can't explain how the universe was created, so therefore it must be a God. And that's the argument from ignorance. It's also called God of the
Mhm.
gaps, like
Yeah,
a
that's
gap
in
in
there
our
as well.
knowledge. Yeah, we sort of put it in there.
Mm.
I've heard science of the gaps as well, and it's such a malformed statement
Yeah.
because, well, and atheism of the gaps I've heard as well. Now the problem with that, and sort of leading into that, because yeah, if you said, we don't know how the universe started, therefore atheism, it would be
Mhm.
a argument from ignorance. But nobody's saying that atheism is an explanation for something, right?
Right.
Nobody's saying, "Hey, atheism caused the universe to come into existence." Nobody's
Right.
saying that.
It's just
What
a
we're
position
saying,
you take.
correct, yeah. Now, what we're saying is we don't know how the universe started. There's no reason to believe it was a god. Um,
Mhm.
I think that I've met some pretty hardcore people who subscribe to naturalism or materialism, saying, "Oh, we don't know that how the universe started, but it must be natural." And I kind of go, "That's
Well,
really
yeah,
getting into." sort of that argument from ignorance kind of thing. It works both ways, as fallacies always do. Now, they're not necessarily wrong. It could absolutely be. And I think I would sort of say, I think that inductively and abductively, I think I would say, hey, I'd make sort of a statement saying, hey, I think it's almost certainly natural. But I wouldn't make that deductive argument. But some people do. I don't think it's a really good argument. But I would rather rely on, hey, everything around us seems to be natural. All of our evidence comes from methodological naturalism confirming these things.
Yeah.
So I would believe based upon the strength of that evidence. And so when you get into non-deductive arguments like inductive and abductive, they can be weak and strong kind of thing. There's a different criteria for evaluating them. But I would sort of get into, hey, that's what evidence would lead me to believe. But I'm open to the possibility there's a God. Just, prove that there's a God. And that's where you get into burden of proof kind of thing. You're claiming it's a God.
Right.
Show it.
Yeah. And that's where I kind of like step into the whole, I claim evidentialism, where, not so much atheism, because if there is a God and we can show that there is a God, then I will know that there is a God, and then I wouldn't be an atheist anymore. But I'm not going to believe in a God until one can be shown to me, in which case I wouldn't believe, I would know. So I don't intend to ever hold a belief in a supernatural way again. I it's either going to be evidential, or I will continue to assert that there is no God.
Well, I think, as far as deductive argument, I would probably rely on provisional statements. I think that I would say sort of provisionally, if I don't get evidence of a God, I don't believe there's a God, right? So if I don't get sufficient evidence for belief, I won't believe. But that is provisional. If someone does give me sufficient evidence to believe, like really strong evidence, I can't just say, well, they've given me really strong evidence, I'm going to ignore it because I don't, because a God can't
That's
exist.
where intellectual honesty comes in.
Correct, yeah, and intellectual consistency, which I find to be incredibly lacking. Because the thing that amazes me is that theists in general, and I mean, I'm just talking general, not all of them do this, but a lot of theists will point out the logical fallacies in somebody else's religion and then proceed to use it themselves. It's actually incredible. That they'll sort of point out, hey, that's a circular argument to a Muslim, and then the Christian will go on to use a circular argument themselves, and you're just like, well, okay, I mean,
And since you had mentioned that it was further down the list, but I'll go ahead and touch on that one. And you had said an example of being the Bible says that God created the earth, and since the Bible is the word of God, then I know it's true. And you use the Bible to show how the Bible is true, and that's just there's no other foundation, which I think is why, honestly, Kent Hovind will not debate the Bible, because he knows that everything that he can use to defend the Bible is coming from the Bible, and his interlocutor is going to try and take it outside the Bible, and he won't do that because he knows that outside of the Bible things don't make as much sense, so he wouldn't be able to defend it as well, and that's just conjecture. I don't know that for sure, but I do believe
it's worse than that. It's worse than that, because he won't even debate creationism at all. It's not just the Bible. He won't debate anything except evolution, because really he won't defend his own worldview, because he has absolutely no answers, and sort of the flaws in his reasoning are glaringly obvious to anybody that's sort of looked at logic and good arguments kind of thing. His arguments are I mean, they're terrible for evolution as well. It's just he's really playing to the audience is what he's doing. But he doesn't.
It's because of his arguments that I left, because like I was using them for a while until somebody would point out to me, hey, that's kind of like an old thing that's already been kind of like thrown to the wayside. You might want to update it. I'm like, oh, okay. And so I would ask, I would email the guys at Dinosaur Adventureland and ask, hey, do we have an update on it? Like, I was just shown this and that. Is there an update on this? And they're like, no, the was never updated. It's this. And I was like, okay, well, maybe they were mistaken or whatever. And so I'll keep using that argument. But then like I started looking more. I started like, because people would tell me these things are wrong. What you said isn't accurate anymore. You need to update it. And so I would look for updates and find out there is no update. There is no argument against this. It's been soundly put to bed. So I have no leg to stand on.
They'll just say, just insist that what you're saying is true, even in the face of all evidence.
Out of Kent's mouth, he told me, because I had asked him a question one time. He told me from his mouth, fake it till you make it. Because I asked him, I was like, what if I can't explain something in the Bible? What if I have no way of? He said, fake it till you make it, and just pray that God reveals it to you before you die. And
I can't
that much dishonesty in that. I was floored by it. I was trying to take it as like some kind of like deep theological thought, and I tried to mull it over, but it made me feel dirty. It was so dishonest, and
I'm so sorry. That's a horrible, to believe in something, and I know it's not my fault. I'm sorry you had to go through that. Because people have said, oh, why are you trying to make these people feel bad? Why are you trying to make them miserable? And it's like, I'm not. I'm just sort of telling them what scientific facts are. If you want to blame someone, blame the people that told them this stuff in the first place.
Yeah, I felt really foolish. Like I was embarrassed. I felt really foolish whenever like I started to realize that these things that I believed were extremely dumb.
Well, Rodney, don't. Like, we've all believed things that are absolutely wrong. I used to think that astrology was absolutely bang on, accurate as anything. I used to think that I could feel how the sort of energy in a place was, and get sort of an idea of what had happened there in the past, whether something bad had happened or something good. I used to believe this stuff because I came from a family that really was into woo, essentially, just spirits and crystals and oils and things like that, aromatherapy. And I mean, that's not too bad, but the oils is an absolute scam. I don't know, have you heard my story kind of thing about how I
don't think
woke up?
I've heard it from you. I think I've heard like little bits and pieces, but
well, see, my mother, she was tired all the time, had this massive tiredness. She could not have energy. She went to, crystals and all of these kind of really zany methods. She had Chinese medicine, which was drinking drinks with scorpions and all kinds of stuff in, just all this nonsense. And she had a friend who was sort of, she'd just met and was really down to earth. And she said, no, go to a doctor, get testing, et cetera, et cetera. And it turned out to be celiac disease. Which is an allergy to gluten that makes the body not be able to absorb nutrients. Cut out gluten from her diet, and bang, she was, back on top of the world. Like, it was, a miracle kind of thing. But, in the sense that, and at that point, I suddenly went, I went, you went through all of that. So she went through years of all of this different woo, trying to fix it. And then, went to reliable science and got it fixed within a month, and it was a wake-up call for me. It was like, this stuff isn't true. And I know what you mean. I felt like a bit of an idiot, but I think I've come to realize that it's pointless sort of to regret that or to blame yourself kind of thing. When you're not equipped with the tools to be able to go, okay, that is a good thing. And I think that began my journey into wondering, critical thinking about how I think and whether it's good the way I think. Is it a reliable way to think? That also, and I've sort of done a lot of therapy throughout my life. And it's very similar, the way you start to think. You might think, oh, these people hate me. Is that thought actually correct? What do I have to base that thought on? Are my thoughts actually accurate to reality? There's a lot of overlap between them, more than you would think. And so I sort of, that begun my journey down, looking at debates and looking at speakers and watching atheist experience and, really saying, hey, this really interests me. The crazy thing is that I know all this logic stuff, but that wasn't my start in logic. My start in logic was electronics, which it's incredible the amount that electronics and propositional logic overlap. It's actually insane how much they overlap, because they're both just the same kind of standard of communication that we're using. One just using sort of words and ideas and concepts, and the other using electronic levels, so electrical levels. That's all the difference is.
Yeah, that's where I got my degree, by the way, was in IT.
Okay. Yeah, nice. So do you know De Morgan's theorem?
I want to say
anyway,
yes, but
yeah, there's something in
not
electronics called De Morgan's theorem, and it applies in normal logic as well. That's sort of how I made that connection for the very first time. Like, wait, this has De Morgan's? That's crazy. And then I investigated, and it has the law of identity, the law of exclusion. It has exactly the same stuff. So sorry, I think I've tangents in the chat.
Oh, that's fine. I enjoy tangents myself.
Well,
like,
then you're in the right
I love
place, my friend.
Just a raw conversation, like unstructured or just a little bit of structure maybe, but like just letting the conversation go. I enjoy that.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, we were sort of talking about circular reasoning. I did want to ask, how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go about circular reasoning kind of thing?
Let's see where we fall.
Okay, so there was basically a guy before Popper. His name's eluding me. I should know this, but Popper talked about falsifiability.
Right.
That you sort of have to falsify things, be able to falsify things in order to even consider them a valid proposition at all.
Yeah.
There was a guy before him, I don't remember the name, but he talked about fallibility. Basically, and Popper extrapolated on this, that every sort of claim to knowledge essentially will fail. So when you get down to it, and there's something called the Munchausen trilemma. It's basically, so Baron Munchausen, the story of Baron Munchausen? So Baron Munchausen is a story about a guy that made up these elaborate stories that was fanciful and obviously not true, right? And a lot of them were used fallacies, like irrational fallacies, basically.
Okay.
So one of the stories, Baron Munchausen got stuck in a mire with his horse, and he couldn't get out of the mire. So what he eventually, claimed to end up doing was grab his own ponytail and lift himself out of the mire, kind of thing. Okay. It's like pulling yourself up with your own bootstraps, kind of thing. It's like an impossible proposition. It's a paradox because you can't do that. So it refers to the way that we try to ground things, and it's based upon one of three outcomes when you get back to the start of it. When you get back to the very, very start of it, like things like our senses. How do we know our senses are true, right? Well, we use our senses to confirm our senses. That's a circular argument, right? That's a problem. So it'll end up with three outcomes to any claim to knowledge at all. Number one is the circular argument. Number two, and you get this a lot from theists, is dogmatic assertion. Just it is because it is, right? And number three is infinite regress. Like, so you get an infinite amount of causes going back, kind of thing.
Right, yeah.
Now, it's very hard to come to terms with this. Popper sort of suggested making a mix of all three, and we have to rely on some kind of presuppositions in order to communicate or engage with anything at all. Right. Like, I have to assume that or presuppose that my senses are accurate for a given level of accuracy. I have to presuppose they're describing something in the real world.
And those kind of things are kind of justified after a while, right? Like when we have corroboration across multiple people, confirming the same thing using the same methodology, it's basically the assumption is therein justified because of that.
Okay, so here's the problem. How are you engaging with those other people?
Well, okay, so I guess I put that poorly. So like if I were to say that we know how radiometric dating works,
Right.
and there is an assumption in radiometric dating about the amount of parent material or parent isotope. I think that's the
Not
or is
necessarily. That's
the
for relative
concentration.
dating,
Yeah.
not absolute dating. Like, so for something like um potassium argon, for instance,
Hmm.
or uranium, what is it? Uranium lead, I believe it is.
Yeah.
Um, the
Strontium
we can
lead.
get a really good idea of how much the
Yeah.
parent element is. Yeah.
Yeah. And basically there are different assumptions made for different fields of science or different theory inside of different theories and the way things work. And when somebody attacks it saying, well, you have to make an assumption for that. Okay, well, that assumption is pretty well justified in that we've done it so many times and so many thousands of different people have done it so many times, and it matches what we see in reality. The
Okay.
assumption
I see what you're saying.
is
So what you're talking about, so here's the thing, like we're talking about knowledge being justified true belief, right? So it's
Mhm,
justified. We can justify these knowledge claims. And
mhm,
because everyone's sort of working on the same axioms, we can kind of, but when we say knowledge, what we're talking about is a very, very high level of certainty. So when
mhm.
I'm referring to deductive
Okay.
arguments in logic are sort of an absolute statements, right? They're
Okay.
not like you're talking about induction, like we know how
Okay. Okay.
they decay. That's induction, right? So when we're talking deductively, we're talking about some more absolute knowledge. And so
Mhm.
when I'm talking about the Munchausen trilemma, it's sort of, yeah, we've got tons of knowledge for, I know that I'm sitting with you. I know we're communicating by the internet. I know that, my senses are correct. I know all of these things.
Yeah.
But what we're not saying is that we have deductively absolute knowledge, because according to Popper and his contemporaries, we can't get there. It all fails in the end. And that's okay, right? It's okay. It's just a sort of way of thinking about it. So circular arguments aren't necessarily that bad, as long as you accept the axioms of those circular argument, or the presuppositions of those circular arguments. So if you say, hey, I felt this and it was rough, if I accept that our senses are true, then I don't have a problem with that. That's not circular, because I've already accepted a proposition in there that our senses are true. So if you say, hey, it felt rough, I could say, well, how do you know your senses are correct? And you go, well,
Mhm.
because I use them. And it's like, well, you're using your senses to prove your senses. Technically, I'm right. Technically, it's a
Yeah.
circular argument, but it's sort of pointless to go into, because I accept that as well. So
Right.
this is where you get presuppositionalists, and this is where they'll sort of
Yeah.
try to hem you in and sort of say, well, how can you justify anything? And it's sort of like, well, if we don't make some presuppositions about our world, we might as well just sit down and cry ourselves to sleep every night. We have to accept
Yeah.
that the information coming in is there's a very high level of chance that that is actually true.
Mhm.
My thoughts are my thoughts, that I exist, that my senses are describing something in the real world. We have to accept this is the case. If we don't, then why are you talking to me? And that's where I pin down precepts and absolutely nail them,
Yeah.
because they want me to justify my senses while asking me to use my senses. You've just justified them by expecting me
Right.
to use them. Right. And that's where I pin
Okay.
them down and sort of hog tie them, because if they want to have a conversation, they have to say, hey, your senses are receiving the input I'm giving you and it is accurate. Or else, what's the point of the conversation? Just quickly, I do apologize. Just quickly,
Oh, no,
I want
yeah,
to give a big shout out to Robin, the absolute wonderful Robin, who gifted a membership. Who did she hit this time? This woman is a sniper. Gods are people
yeah.
too. Bam, bam. You get it from Robin. Bam, winner. And Yahooligan also is trying to contend. Give it up, Justin. You'll never win. You'll never win, mate. Give it up. And he hit. You are Victoria. Nice shot. Yeah, nice shot. Another winner. Yeah, sorry. So I just wanted to give them shout outs.
Yeah, that's good. He's good.
Both amazing people. I love them both.
So,
yeah,
one that I really want to touch on, because it's honestly, yeah, like it's very commonly used in creationist arguments, but it sometimes I feel like it gets like glossed over a lot, and that's the argument from authority, where like the example being Dr. Smith, a renowned creationist scientist, says evolution is false, and so I know it's false.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the arguments for authority is basically saying because this person, this authority figure, believes it so, it is so. But we often get accused of doing the same with science.
Yeah.
Which is a problem because science isn't sort of a deductively thing. We're not saying, hey, science discovers it, so it is absolutely true deductively. But it's more, we're basically saying that the process of science produces demonstrable results, right? So that is what gives us an understanding of the world. So it isn't an appeal to any kind of authority figure. It's an appeal to the process working, which we see at work. So when they do say that's an argument for authority, it's not. Plus, the argument authority is when you quote an authority who's not really an authority. So when we're saying the scientific consensus is generally an authority on things. It doesn't, and again, just because you point out a fallacy doesn't mean that they're wrong. The consensus could be wrong. However, it is a strong argument for the truth of that proposition. If you say, hey, the scientific consensus agrees with it. Number one, the scientific consensus is an authority. So it kind of sticks. But number two, you're not appealing to one authority. You're appealing to a process that produces it.
Right.
So it's not.
And that goes back to what I was saying a minute ago, where people have cross corroborated. They've done the experiments across, thousands and thousands of people and, over hundreds or 20, 40, 30 years. And we have this corroboration, and that gives it higher degrees of certainty. And that's why was it a chat last night or the night before? My weekend days are blurring together now.
Know the feeling.
With Leo, where he was sort of defending the fact that science can sometimes say things are absolute, and I really wanted to jump in and say, well, no, because the reason science makes room for things to be incorrect or to change is because, yes, as certain as we can be of a thing, and as unlikely as it is for a thing to change, we can discover something that 100% invalidates this thing that we understood to be true. And now we completely shift our understanding of it to this new discovery and toss out that old one because this new one explains it better and more thoroughly, and it connects it with other parts of reality and science that we now understand to fold into this seamlessly. And like with where this is made of atoms. We know this is made of atoms, and this, and like, okay, yeah, sure, but what if we find out that atoms are made of something else, or that what we see as atoms are completely different? Because splitting hairs here, I guess we've never really seen an atom. We've just kind of imaged it with an electron microscope.
Correct.
So that could just be the shadow of something. It could be a number of things. We don't know for certain until we can actually see it, but we could very well overturn that and find out that it's something else, and maybe not even throw out atomic theory altogether, but alter it, maybe give it a new name and integrate it with the new knowledge to further our understanding of something, and that's why we say that things aren't absolute in science.
Yes, I would agree. I think I'm kind of surprised that Leo would use the word absolute.
Mhm.
He may say certain and things. I think I had this conversation and I sort of said, well, what if simulation theory is true, which is
Yeah,
sort of
that
saying
that's what yeah, you
that
had brought
kind of
that
thing.
up. And that's
And then,
where I kind of bit back my tongue because I was like, okay, I think Mark's
oh no,
he's
you should have said something. You
yeah.
should have said something. Was that on Matters Now?
Yes, yeah. It was
Yeah, I
after
did
it was
notice you
after the
there.
it was after the one with Nadir. You just
Yeah, yeah.
talked
I
to him.
wish you'd hung around. You probably had something to do, but
Yeah, the
you're in
the
the
kids were
yeah, yeah, no worries, no
messing a
worries. But
little
like, I
bit,
was like,
so
oh, Rodney's gone now. I didn't even see you leave. Look, and so I think his answer to that was, oh well, as far as we're concerned in the simulation, that would be real. But
Mhm.
if you sort of look at a Boltzmann brain kind of thing, the brain in the vat
Yeah,
kind of thing, then that's not actually a thing in the world, and it is not what we think it is. So in fact, they do not exist as we think they are. Therefore, that is wrong. So I think I would push back on that idea that we have absolute knowledge in science. And I don't think
mhm.
many scientists would say that. I would certainly, have an argument with Leo over that. I think that like when he's sort of saying that, though, he means sort of um, insanely high level of certainty to the point where we
Right,
might as well assume it is. I'm not sure if
right.
he really means
As
absolute. I don't.
unlikely as it is for it to change, it still can, but some
Right.
people take that, as like, okay, well, that's settled for me. And if you want to say that's settled for
Yeah.
me, I got no problem with that. Like, but if you sit there and you say like, oh no, well, science has settled this, like, that's where I'm like, I I, I disagree with you there.
Well, it has. I will say that science has settled that, and but it depends
Mhm.
what you mean by that, because science settling something means that an
Right.
overwhelming
Okay.
amount of scientists have an incredibly high level of confidence about that thing. Like, so,
Okay.
I don't see a problem with sort of saying, "Hey, science has settled that; it's a done issue,"
Right.
because
Okay.
you know, and what's odd is that the same people that sort of say, well, science could be wrong, still use the scientific principles and the things we've discovered every day in
Mhm.
their lives without saying, oh, my mobile phone shouldn't work because that could be wrong. They'll just use their mobile phone based upon the scientific principles that we've discovered. They
Mhm.
will use their car based upon internal combustion from the scientific methods that we've discovered. They won't push back against anything that interferes with their life. They'll
What
just
was it
use it.
Nadir kept saying? That was he saying the scientific method is, or that just science in general is just trial and error?
Hmm,
Because
I
every
don't
time
know
he
about
said
that.
something about it's just trial and error, I was like, "Oh, well, it's not."
No, no, it's not. It's a process that takes the results of
Yes.
experimentation and then observes the effect and then does more tests and
Mhm.
experimentation to hone in on what the actually is going on. But
Like
anyway, no, he
baking
said.
is trial and error.
Well, he said to me that science is what scientists agree on, which is nonsense. It's such a bad definition because,
Yes.
just say, and I remember really vividly because it was the CSIRO, which is Australia's foremost scientific research institute, and they invented Wi-Fi, and it's hilarious how they did it. They were searching for miniature black holes, bouncing signals around, trying to find miniature black holes. Now, they were doing science, right? They were
Uh-huh.
doing science. Miniature black holes don't exist. So they weren't doing what science agrees on or the scientists
Mhm.
agree on, but they were still doing science. And as a result of that, they found they could pick up the signal they were using to try and find the black hole on the other side of the room. And then they said, hey, we can transmit data like this. And that turned into Wi Fi. I'm not even joking. Like a completely failed experiment made an incredible useful invention.
Yeah.
And we see a lot of this. We see NASA make incredibly useful inventions when they
Mhm.
totally ball something up against all scientific sort of consensus kind of thing. And
Mhm.
that's the beauty of it. We say, hey, we're wrong, what can we do with that information? um that's great. That's still science. So his definition absolutely fails horrendously.
Yeah.
And but he just looked it up in a dictionary, which isn't going to give you anything meaningful about what science is.
Right.
It's really not. It's going to give you how people use it in a conversation
Mhm.
rather than the actual concept that we're looking at. So if I
Yeah.
say science to you, I may be saying, hey, the things that scientists agree on, and that's how I may be using it in a conversation. But when
Mhm.
you get into the philosophy of science, that isn't what science actually is. It's just a newtic. It's just a way to shortcut,
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say to you.
I think that's why also, like, when I see things like a little article headline, it's like scientists have discovered such and such, or scientists invent this and that thing. And I'm just like, which scientists? Like, can we get a name? Can we like
Yeah.
get a lab? Can we like what field of science were they working on? Because it could have been like a collaborative effort across a couple of different labs, a couple of different fields, and
Mm.
it could have been, like you said, a complete accident.
Yeah.
It's like I always see those, and I'm just like, but what kind of information am I getting here? All like I'm probably just
Mm.
gonna get like a whole bunch of scientists found this does this
Yeah.
and this does this, so they put this together and now we have this.
Mhm.
Like,
Well,
okay,
it's
well, that's
interesting because I was watching an actor. I think it was Benedict Cumberbatch, but I'm not sure. I was watching him on YouTube, and he was sort of saying,
Benadryl
it's kind of,
cucumberbatch.
yeah, that guy. He was sort of saying it's odd that he gets paid so much. I think it was him. It could have been somebody else, but because all he's doing is pretending. I think it was in relation to. Have you ever seen The Imitation Game?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so The Imitation Game is about Alan Turing. Alan Turing,
Okay.
if you're into computers, he basically invented the modern computer. The
Yeah.
reason why we have computers is basically Alan Turing. And he invented it during World War II in order to crack the Enigma code. So the first computer designed to crack this code. Um, and he basically he must have saved millions of lives from cracking the code and ending the war early. It really amazing and paved the way for the modern computer system. But I think Cumberbatch sort of said it's weird that I'm playing this guy and he's saved so many lives, yet I'm getting paid billions, and he's So what happened to him? He was a gay man who lived during 1940s in England. So after the
Okay.
war, he was found to be gay and convicted and chemically castrated. Um, yeah, so he ended up um, exiting his own life, and it was a loss for the entire field of computing. And his name is said with reverence by programmers everywhere because he was the original who paved the way for everything we do. An absolute genius, and I can't imagine how different the world would be if that did not happen to him. And I use it as a case of, hey, your attacks on these people, they may be providing you with the most amazing technology you've ever seen, kind of
Hmm.
thing. Like, you can't just attack people for who they are. But I guess my point is that it's kind of odd in our society where we reward people for pretending, and we don't really reward that much people for changing the world, kind of thing. It's always
Hmm.
seemed odd to me. I know I'm a bit strange, but that's always seemed odd to me. Um, and I think that but I will grant that actors in general and people that are successful in general, a lot of them do give back a lot to these charities and these
Hmm.
organizations
Yeah.
because I think they know, hey, other people are also doing work that's incredibly helpful, kind of thing. So I
I
just
wonder
find
if
it a bit weird.
wasn't it Killing Murphy? I wonder if you felt the same way about the
Colin Murphy.
Oppenheimer.
I haven't seen that yet, which is weird because I
Hmm.
absolutely love the director. I can't remember his name.
Christopher Nolan.
Christopher Nolan. Yeah, yeah. I absolutely loved Interstellar. That's probably,
Oh,
if that isn't my favorite movie, it's got to be in my top three easily. Easily, I
it's a really
absolutely
good
love that
movie. Yeah,
movie.
I'll
Um,
rewatch
I, I
every few months or so.
Yeah, yeah. I got a lot of inspiration for that movie. I won't lie. I think
Mhm.
it really spoke to me about sort of what I wanted my channel to be, and what I want to focus on, kind of thing.
Mhm.
We've gone way off topic as well, but that's okay. That's all right.
Well, if we want to just jump right back on the tracks,
Yeah,
I'm just jumping all over my list here, but the last one on the list, which is my favorite, by the way, is the moving the goalposts.
Right.
I love this one because it's so very transparent. Like you can, like on surface level, you can notice it happening.
Yeah, sure.
So the example that I've written down is even if scientists were to find transitional fossils, that still wouldn't prove evolution because there's no evidence of one species evolving into another.
Yeah, well, the best one is that Futurama clip, isn't it? Like where he basically goes, the professor goes, "Oh, we found
with the monkey."
Yeah, the orangutan's going, but where's the transitional fossil between this one and this one? Oh, we found that. We found Australopithecus sediba. Where's the transitional fossil between this and like sort of, so that's shifting the goalposts kind of thing.
Right.
So he's just going, okay, further. You've got to get further. And sort of, so he's like, oh, where's the transitional fossil? Oh, damn, you actually got me this time. Oh, you won this one kind of thing. It's like, has he won anything? No, of course not.
No.
All he's doing is shifting the goalposts every single time. It's very similar to the Mott and Bailey fallacy kind of thing, if you've ever heard of that one.
Never heard that one.
So the Mott and Bailey's kind of similar, but instead what you're doing is you've got two positions, and one's really strong and one's less strong. And you're basically saying, okay, I'm going to use the stronger one to kind of bully my way into the weaker one. So the idea is you've got the Mott, which is the outer curtain of a castle, and then you have the Bailey, which is the keep in the center, the really strong position in the center. So it's like when Hovind kind of goes, oh, well, you've showed all this stuff about evolution, but you don't know where everything came from, do you? Kind of thing. He goes back to the really defensible position. Well, you don't know how humans came about, or, you think something came from nothing kind of thing. So he goes back to the more defensible position while still maintaining that the Mott on the outside is not taken, that's still there kind of thing. So he's kind of retreated inwards and said, no, but you haven't won because you haven't gotten to this more secure position. But you just have to point out in that circumstance that, hey, I don't have to disprove this position because that's not what the argument is. That's not what the proposition is about. It's about the outer curtain, and we've taken that. So it doesn't matter what happens on the inside. My argument is that it's evolution and not Big Bang Theory that we have to conquer. So what's interesting about that is you can sort of point out, hey, you're retreating from the actual argument because you know that it's been proven. So
that's not what the argument was, but now you're saying this, and if you want me to, I can jump into this. I love it when it happens because you can see it like happening right in front of you.
Sure.
And even if you're not very well versed, like myself in logical fallacies or watching debates and picking these things out in real time, even something like moving the goalposts, it really seems very transparent and easy to pick out because you can watch the argument change. Where they'll ask you, okay, well then, how do you explain this? And then you explain it, and they're like, yeah, but see, that doesn't also explain this. You're like, well, that wasn't what you said to begin with. Why? And I'm like, that Leonardo DiCaprio meme. Snap his finger pointing at the TV. That's what it makes me think of. But I get it every time. And watching it, or sometimes like what some people call a rolling goalpost. And so far I've taken that to mean where like they'll like start on this argument, and if you like start like hammering it pretty good, they'll move to this argument real quick, and then as you're like hammering that one, they'll kind of go back to this one. Then but also, but then, and yet, and they just kind of keep on rolling back and forth.
Yeah, Hovind does do a lot of that. He sort of
yeah,
will go back
he
to,
definitely does.
you know,
Have you
cows
ever,
don't come from non-cows don't come, and then he'll go to something else and then back to that one, and it's just sort of, you know, all over the place.
you know how he uses the one for dogs, right? Dogs produce dogs, and you might have a big
Yeah.
dog, might have a small dog, and he'll say, well, a wolf and a dog look similar. It's probably because they had a common designer, or they might have come from a common ancestor, but it's still a dog.
So does a hyena and a wolf.
And I think the reason he doesn't use cats as in that example rather than dogs is because there is such a nasty, massive difference from like just the biggest feline to the smallest feline.
Right.
And it's just so, it's such a major difference. And you have clades within the feline clade that would just eviscerate his argument.
Yeah, like the hyena.
Yeah. Because
It's a
it looks more like a dog.
filiform.
Yeah, but
Sure. It's a cat. Like it's closer to a cat than a dog. I won't say it's a cat because, you know, but it is a filiform. It is a, instead of a caniform, it's a filiform. But you would
He
swear
didn't know that skunks were filiforms.
he didn't. Oh,
He did
okay,
not know that.
interesting. The one that I would love to, and I haven't brought it up. I really wanted to, but I stopped debating Kent around the time he was arrested for battery on his.
Yeah.
That happened.
Yeah.
So the one that I love is what is a Tasmanian tiger? Is it a dog? Is it a cat? What is it?
I'm trying to picture it in my head. So the Tasmanian tiger is kind of like it's got shoulders higher than its rear end, right? And it's got stripes.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm imagining the right animal.
It's a thylacine. That's what it is.
Huh. And that's not a filiform, is it?
Nope.
Because I'm trying to think, because I don't think I've ever seen the pads of its feet, so like I wouldn't be able to really match.
I just want to show it for the audience because this is actually hilarious. I love this. What is that? You know what it is? Oh, I haven't put it on the screen. I'm sorry.
I was about to say, I'm not seeing anything yet. There.
Yeah. You just have to guess blind.
Ooh. I would say poor taxidermy, but I don't know. To me, that looks more like a dog, but I wouldn't guess that it's a canine. I would probably guess that it's maybe something completely different. Like, is it a marsupial?
It is a marsupial. Well done. Well done. That's a marsupial. That's closer to a kangaroo.
Ah, okay.
Right. So this is the thing, like you can't just, and I've always had that problem with creationists. They say, hey, it looks like a fill in the blank. And that doesn't mean it's that thing. I think a debate with T-Rock and I think it was Doc Dino. It was either Doc Dino or Grayson. I can't remember who it was, you know, critical based theory. Yeah. One of the two, he sort of said, hey, that looks like a maple leaf, and maple leaves didn't live at that time. The problem was that it wasn't a maple leaf, and his diagram even had sweet gum leaf next to it, right? And sweet gums are a completely different family of tree.
I know what you're talking about too. I think I was there for that one.
Yeah, so sweet gums are a completely different family of tree. They're so unrelated to a maple leaf. But he's like, look, this is a maple leaf, you know. And he's like, oh, they may say it's this, but it looks like a maple leaf, but it's not a maple leaf. And yes, maple leaves didn't exist at that point in the fossil record, but it's a sweet gum leaf, which did exist at you know. It's kind of this idea of, you know, and same with the trees that Hovind does. Oh, well, I look at it, looks like a thing, so it must be that thing. It's not that thing.
He does that with isopods too. He calls them trilobites.
Sure. Yeah. A lot of the time we look at things and we go, okay, it looks like my familiar understanding of things, but that's not a very reliable way to find out what it is, just looking at it. Yeah. You really have to go and investigate and get some better criteria for what it is. because your senses are, I mean, I assume that they're correct, but they can be incredibly inaccurate. And we have a tendency to identify things with what we already know, and that's why pareidolia is a thing. You look at a structure and you see a face, so you look at a car, it's got headlights here and a bumper thing here, and you go, oh, that looks like a happy car. Right. There's something about faces that we pick out. So we can't rely on our senses to say, it is that thing that I'm looking at. No, we need more information about it. We need to be able to have a reliable way to evaluate what that thing actually is. Yeah.
And that's an example where our senses can fail us, but then we can correct our senses by using our sense more carefully.
Yeah, and use sort of more empirical things to do it, like measurements, like just eyeballing something. Just eyeballing something is never going to be as accurate as using a ruler. That's just the reality of the situation. If you have, and that's where tools not only allow us to do things, you don't have the strength to lop a branch, but if you get shears, you can do it. It's just tools can increase our physical attributes, but it also can increase our sensory attributes. You can't tell how far something is away, but now we have tools, we can do that kind of thing to a high level of accuracy. So tools not only enhance our physical abilities, they also enhance our sensory abilities, which I think is just amazing. We are such clever apes that we've sort of made up for our incredibly bad senses, an incredibly bad physique. We are frail. Our senses are terrible, especially our sense of smell is absolutely terrible in the animal kingdom. Our eyesight isn't too bad, but it's still, a hawk or an octopus has such superior vision to a human. It's not even funny. Our hearing's terrible. Everything about us is pretty bad, on the scale of animals, but we use tools to compensate, and that's been our victory, basically.
So another one I want to move to here. One that you'll probably have a plethora of examples for is the false dichotomy.
Right.
Where
absolutely
you're presenting two options as if they are the only two options available to you, where where it's like, oh, it's either evolution or creationism, and where evolution deals with biodiversity, it doesn't deal with the origin of the universe. Creationism kind of does. It doesn't deal with the origin of life, where creationism kind of does. And when somebody tries to dichotomize the two of them, that's directly where my brain goes. It's like, okay, well, we're not even talking about two of the exact same level of
that's not the dichotomy. That isn't the dichotomy, right? The dichotomy is sort of where you're giving two things and they're the only two options available. So let's take origin of life. You can sort of go that's a good example. So it's not about whether it applies or not. That's something different. That's sort of a fallacy of false cause, maybe. So really what you're saying is, if it is not X, then it has to be Y, right? So you have false dichotomies and you have true dichotomies, right? So the case is either Socrates is a cat or Socrates is not a cat. There is no other option available. That is a true dichotomy. No, it is, because however you classify a cat, right? However you classify it, it's either going to be a cat in that classification or not be a cat in that classification, right? So even if you sort of say...
If you say everything in the universe is either bananas or it's not.
Right. Or, I either have a coffee cup in front of me or I do not have a coffee cup in front of me. Now, what you classify as in front of me, you might not say, you might say, hey, if it's off to the side, that's not in front of you. Okay, but one will be true. One is necessarily true. It either is or it isn't, and that is
a dichotomy.
It's a true dichotomy. There is no other option. Now, if you say, okay, well, either the origin of the universe is a god or it is a natural occurrence, right? Or so it's either just say humans, right? That was my original one. It is either abiogenesis or it is a god. that is a false dichotomy. And all you've got to do to show a false dichotomy is give one other example.
One other example. Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is, even if it's got no proof to back it up. Because they're using a deductive argument by saying, hey, if I cancel out this one, there's only one left, right?
Mhm.
That's their argument. So
Yeah.
if they say, hey, if I cancel out abiogenesis, there is only God left. And you can say, well, how about magic? How about aliens? How about all these other options? There's an infinite amount of possibilities.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to say the creation of humans is either God or not God, that's true dichotomy. If you want to say the origin of humans is either abiogenesis or not abiogenesis, that's a true dichotomy, right? Those are both true dichotomies. But what you can't do is say, well, because I've ruled out abiogenesis, that shows God, because you're basically saying it has to be God when it doesn't have to be God. There's a ton of other options as well. Now, you can go on to say, hey, well, I've ruled out abiogenesis. Here's all this other evidence I have, or these other arguments I have. So it is God. That's fine. You know, you're not saying it necessarily has to be God if the other it's called a prong or a leg of the dichotomy is ruled out. But you can't use an argument of just, well, not abiogenesis, therefore God. And they do it all the time.
Yeah.
And the same is true in reverse, actually. If you say, well, it's not God, so it's got to be naturalistic, I think that's a false dichotomy as well, because there's other things other concepts that are supernatural, and it's not God. So it could be, you know, a spirit wind from the aether of enlightenment. Who knows? You know, any other example will show that a false dichotomy.
Yeah. No, I get it. Like, presenting, like, if somebody were to present, as I used to do, that you know, well, we know God did this and everybody else thinks this, so one of these two things has to be true. I'm trying to do a thing, like, I don't know if you were there when I said, but I'm looking at Kent Hovind's 4 questions every religion tries to answer, including atheism, is what he says. And the very first one is, who am I? And with like a qualifying question to that being, and what am I worth? While I've been looking into that, I have like really been working over, like, okay, how do I understand me? Like, where do I get my idea of me and who I am? And like, while I've been doing this, I've noticed, like, you know, I can't just pin it down to like it's this or that. Like, I can't just pin down to one reason why I would have been an angry person back in 2011, because I was a very angry person in 2011, and I was a Christian then, but I was just constantly exuding anger. Like, at any given point, if you ask me, are you angry right now, I would probably be like, no. But like, overall, my general self, I was an angry person.
You know, anger doesn't exist, right?
Really?
That's what I believe. Yeah. And I used to have I will say, monumental anger issues as a young man. Like, just furious rages, you know, just absolute out of control rages.
Is that anything like I guess what I've come to believe now is that there's no such thing as a negative emotion. Like, something isn't, like, your emotions aren't inherently negative. They have a negative connotation, or people may view them negatively, but it's not bad or wrong to be upset.
Well,
Like,
that's true as well.
Yeah.
I think there are negative emotions, sort of, but it's more the consequences of them being negative. Like shame, I would say, is a negative emotion, where you're internalizing a sense of guilt to say something's wrong with me. That's a very, very negative emotion. But I do believe that no emotion is wrong, because they're sort of telling you about your mental state and what's happening in your subconscious, kind of thing. So sort of saying a feeling is wrong is kind of a category error kind of thing. Like, it's not, an emotion isn't describing something in the world. it's sort of a reaction you're having to a mental state
Mhm.
that is coming on. So it can't be wrong, because that's just a bad way of looking at it.
Mhm.
It's just a
It's
it,
interesting you mentioned shame too.
right. Well,
That's
so
where
what
I
I've
like that's where I found the one of the most profound dichotomies
right.
and like at least where I was concerned.
Okay, well, we'll get to that in a sec. But
Yeah.
my mother was a psychologist, and I'm not a psychologist, so I want to make that clear, absolutely clear. So, take that with a grain of salt. This is just my opinion and my belief. But what helped me was, she used to say that there was no such thing as anger. Anger is a secondary response to a fight or flight stimulation. And I never understood what that meant until much later in my life, as I developed my critical thinking and stuff. So, um, what helped me, because really what I think it is you get afraid, and you have a fear response, and our fear response has a number of outcomes to it, and the main two are fight or flight, right? Either run away or fight. There's also freeze and fawn, but I won't go into those are kind of a bit different kind of thing. So um really, the question isn't what you're afraid of. The question is what you're angry about. The question is, what are you afraid of? Because the flip side of that anger is, there'll be a consequence that you don't want to happen, that you're afraid that will happen. When I started thinking about it, I could start to pin down, okay, I'm not angry at this guy cutting me off. I'm afraid that I'm going to be late for work, or have this thing happen to me. And for some reason, for me at least, and this is just my experience, that would short circuit the anger, because I realized I'm not angry at this random person that did something they're probably unaware of. I'm afraid. I'm afraid of being disrespected, and people are going to look down on me. I'm afraid of people calling me names or calling me stupid, so I get frustrated in conversation. And, I'm not angry at them. I'm afraid of being made to look like an idiot, or afraid to sort of, be belittled by people, kind of thing. So that helped me. But I wonder, is there anything, like, when you were really angry, that you were in fact afraid of?
You know, I was trying to pin down like during it because like I had given the example, or well, I've
Mm.
typed out. I haven't recorded it yet, but I give out the example like you can look at you can reflect inward on yourself and find, are you an angry person, and then you can take a step further and find the source of your anger, like where did it come
Right,
from,
what's underneath it?
why are
Yeah,
you
yeah,
angry, what
yeah.
happened to make you this way, and
Mm.
and then when you peel the layers back on that, you can figure out where it came from
Yeah,
and where the source is. And while I was doing it, I was trying to find out, what was it that made me angry? Why was I an angry person? And I think I think I'm certain, as certain as I can remember correctly, that I was angry because I was coming out of what they would have called the world, and coming into this very highly religious place, and I was
yeah.
already doing things like, eh, I don't want to say I was better than anybody, but I was doing things better than people who had been in church their whole lives and doing this stuff and been around this stuff their whole lives. I was
Mm.
doing it better than they were. And I think it was because they were complacent, and I was still hungry for it. And
Yeah,
I was being looked down on, or I was being framed as somebody who was being a showboater. I was being arrogant, but really I was so excited, and I was happy to be getting all this kind of new information and
you were
stuff.
trying your best. You're putting in
Yeah,
a lot of effort.
and
Yeah.
I was getting shot down, and I was getting pushed down and smothered and silenced a lot. Um,
Mm.
and I was just it made me. I'd almost actually punched a kid at this Bible college I was at, uh, because like he had said something and I corrected him, and then one of the administrators at the college were like, well, he would know better than you. And I was like, but I'm right. And he was like, he was doing his best to very politely and in Christian love rub my face in it. And it was, and I was boiling over, and I started walking toward him. And on the surface, I probably looked nice and calm, but I was like, in my head, I was like, okay, I'm going to get over there and I'm going to turn and I'm just going to lay right into his chin. But then, like, I was like, no, if I do that, I'm going to get in big trouble. So I was like, So I stopped dead in my tracks and I turned around and I went to my dorm room.
Yeah, so I think that that's really warranted. I think that, some of the frustration of when we're really trying and people dismiss, they don't acknowledge our efforts for what they actually are. I think that that's very common occurrence. I've worked in a lot of jobs where, I've been trying really hard and I haven't been recognized for that kind of thing, and other people do. There's a sort of something that influences our morality called reciprocity, that people have the same acknowledgement for the same job done. And they've studied this on capuchin monkeys, which is a hilarious video, by the way, because they give one a grape and the other cucumber, and they'll eat the cucumber just fine until he sees the other monkey get a grape for the same work and then loses his... it's absolutely unfair. That. Yeah, it's absolutely unfair. And the monkey's right. It is unfair. He's doing exactly the same thing. He should get the same reward. That's fair. So this frustration, this fear that, hey, I'm going to be trying as hard as I can, and I'm just going to be seen like dirt. That's a real fear, right? I've had that fear in jobs before. Like, I'm going to work as 10, 20 years in this job, and I'm never going to get a promotion. I'm never going to be acknowledged. I'm never, other people are going to be promoted above me. It's a real fear. And what it comes out at is frustration and anger, like at the company, going, oh, this company's absolute crap, like they don't give anyone a chance kind of thing. And that may not be true, right? There may be other reasons why it's happening, or there may be other things going on. It may just be a systemic problem within that organization. It's got nothing to do with me. It's not to do with me. But the fear is that you're going to be belittled, even though you're trying your very hardest. And I'm really sorry to hear that. That absolutely sucks. If we can look at, hey, what I'm afraid of, what the rational thing to do if I'm afraid of something is go to my boss or manager and go, hey, this is what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid I'm going to work really hard and I've been trying really hard and I'm not going to go anywhere. Addressing that fear rather than reacting in the fight reaction that goes, okay, I'm going to smack this manager right in the mouth because they promoted this other guy above me. Actually, saying that, I learned later on that in actual fact, in organizations, sometimes you never go someplace if you give it 100% all the time. Like, you shouldn't give 100% all the time, because basically you'll become absolutely necessary to that position and they'll never want to promote you out of it. Like, you save the 100%.
When I worked at Bass Pro Shops, we had our team lead and we had our manager, and our manager, she was retiring, and when she left, they were looking for a new manager, and all of us in the department were like, promote Steve. He's like, we've been without a manager for 3 months. Steve's been stepping up to the plate, and we have improved the department. Sales are up. Everything looks good. Everything's where it needs to be. Overstock is fine. The shelves in the back are fine. Everything is organized, and like, he's doing a great job, and we like him. Promote Steve. And then they ended up calling back a manager who was let go from that position before, and rehired him on in that position. And then he come in and like, he undid a lot of Steve's work, and a lot of people in the department were unhappy. And then I was able to get I had another job lined up, and I was like, you know what? I got 3 weeks before I start training for, it was corrections. I was going into correctional facility as an officer. And, I was like, I'll take 3 weeks off. And I told the guy, I was like, hey man, I really think you've messed the department up. Steve had it running fine, but I'm going to leave. and like I gave him my name badge, and I took off the Bass Pro Shops vest, and I handed it to him. I said, "Sorry, but I don't like this job anymore," and I left.
Yeah.
He called
Yeah.
me like an hour later and was like, "Hey man, can we talk about this?" I was like, "No, I don't really want to." You sure?
Well,
Because I think you're making a mistake. I was like, "No, I have another job lined up. I'm good."
yeah, I don't mind getting feedback when I leave. I think
Yeah.
that's more than reasonable. It's entirely up to you, of course. I just, it's amazing how many companies get feedback from employees that are leaving and don't change what they're doing. It's
Mhm.
just, why did you ask? If you don't. But
Steve
hey,
deserved that
it's
job.
okay.
He did, but I think he was just doing too well as a team lead, and they were just
Yeah,
like, "We're gonna leave him in that spot because if
right.
this guy doesn't work out, he's gonna do the job of a manager for the pay of a team lead, and it'll all work out for us."
Mm,
That's, I mean, I can't prove that empirically, but I think that's what it is.
mm. Yeah, I also think that sometimes people don't want to promote people that are more capable than them up
Mhm.
to, a
Oh.
position because they might not seem that capable anymore. But that's sort of, I'll get my tinfoil hat for that one. I
Also, I
definitely.
gotta scratch this itch because the nerd in me is coming out. So Robin had
Yeah.
said that I don't really like spiders, but I don't kill them unless they're poisonous. Spiders aren't poisonous; they're venomous, and as is necessary to their nature, all spiders are venomous, but there's only like a handful of spiders whose venom is medically significant to
Yeah, for
humans,
humans.
and there's only like I think only two of them. Um, the Brazilian wandering spider and the Sydney funnel-web spider, whose venom is medically significant to an adult in good health.
Mhm.
And
Um,
there's like one spider, I think I think it's like in Central Africa, maybe in like the Congo somewhere, uh, whose like bite is just so massive, like it gets easily infected, and that's significant. But other than it, like, yeah.
well, so there's some other stuff as well, like
Mhm.
a lot of spiders. They're like, especially the tiny ones. Their venom is venomous to us, but their bite won't actually penetrate any skin whatsoever. Their
Right, yeah.
fangs just aren't large enough to actually penetrate. Um,
Was the case
like
with
we
most
we
jumping spiders.
Right. We have a redback spider over here, and only 1 in 4 bites will the person actually be envenomed. They're horrible
Mhm.
because they have a tendency to like hide underneath a toilet seat kind of thing. Which, so you imagine where you get bit with that one.
Yeah.
Um, but it will only kill like a very small child or a
Mhm.
dog. A grown adult will just make sick, and only 1 in 4 bites penetrate to actually make someone sick because their fangs are so small.
Mhm.
All right. Good night, Max. Thanks for being here, mate. And the other thing is we have things called whitetails. Now, whitetails are spiders that aren't venomous to us, but they seem to have a bacteria that can cause necrosis of the flesh.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah.
horrifying. Over here, it's not so much the spiders; it's the snakes that are a problem. That's the real problem over here.
Mhm.
Um, I've got a picture of it's hilarious. It's like one of the most Australian pictures I've ever seen. It's a children's playground with
Mhm.
a sign right in front of it saying danger, snakes area kind of thing, like right in front of the children's playground. I understand why they did it, but it's hilarious, because other countries may go, well, there's snakes about, let's not put a children's playground in this area with snakes. The Australians just go, well, we'll just put a sign up so everybody knows how dangerous it is, like,
Australia. Every
yeah.
place is snake place.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true.
No, I on the topic of snakes in Australia, I a lot of the time I'll have pop up on my YouTube feed the video of Steve Irwin going around Australia and showing the
Mm,
10 most venomous snakes. The title of it is 10 most venomous snakes in the world. And
yeah.
I understand that like it's just the ones there in Australia because like there's like
Mm,
a couple like I think sea crates further, like up in the South China Sea, that are a little more venomous than some of the land dwelling snakes in Australia.
Yeah,
But
and coral snakes are incredibly venomous. Yeah.
But I love that video. I like watching it because like I just like watching Steve Irwin. So.
Rip Steve Irwin. It was going to happen. I wouldn't have put my money on a stingray or a manta ray, but
everybody had their money on a snake or a croc.
Crocodile. Yeah. No, but I mean, I appreciate what he did for world conservation, everything like that.
Yes.
But he was way too blasé about animals. He just was. They're dangerous. They're supposed to be dangerous. They protect themselves. Any wild animal is freaking dangerous. Just leave them alone. They're not a pet. They're not for engaging with. Actually, the funniest one is probably the most venomous thing in Australia is actually an octopus.
Yeah, the
I'm not even
octopus.
joking. Yeah.
Or
insanely venomous.
Irukandji, the jellyfish. That one's pretty up there too.
Yeah, that
right?
one's pretty bad as well. Yeah. But I think the blue ring is slightly more venomous pound for pound kind of thing. The jellyfish, the problem is that it wraps around you, and you'll have tons of stingers in you, and so you get a high volume of venom. But the blue ringed octopus, it just nips you, and you don't make it to the phone to call somebody. It is that venomous, like it's insane. But yeah, I think we're well off topic as
again.
Well. Like, yeah, absolutely.
We were on dichotomies, and now we're on.
We were on dichotomies. We were. Like, this is my fault. I 100% admit it.
I love it. I love it. I feel.
Oh, mate, there's a reason why I have a tangent emoji. It's not for show. It's not a aesthetic choice. It's a necessary thing to let the chat know why we're talking about venomous animals when the title is conversation about fallacies. That's essentially why it's there.
But no, I had said because you had mentioned shame, and it was looking at the things that I had shame for in the past, where I started to realize that I was presenting myself with a false dichotomy about it, because I would look at my shame, and I the shame would come back, as you're thinking about it, you feel that shame again. And it's specifically, I was thinking about the shame I felt whenever I had come to understand that what I was taught to be true was in fact incorrect, and that I was a fool, shouting it from the rooftops kind of thing, saying that it's true. And I felt that shame coming back, and I was like, I thought I was right, but I was actually wrong, and that was a false dichotomy, because I was misled.
The shame part is you are a fool, right?
Yeah.
You're not a fool. You're an intelligent guy, Rodney. I can tell that just by speaking with you, mate.
I try to be.
Look, I this is the thing. Like, guilt is a perfectly reasonable emotion. We do things wrong. We feel guilt. We try to make amends. There's a reason for guilt. It's a pro-social sort of thing. It allows us to say, hey, I've done something wrong. Let me make it up to this person, build bridges, repair hurts, and that sort of hurts repairing is where you get quite strong bonds from. It can be a bonding thing when you say, hey, I've done you wrong. I want to make amends for it. I want to make it up to you. And that's where guilt's handy. But guilt is where I've done something wrong. Shame is when you internalize it. You sort of say, hey, I did this. That makes me a fool or a bad person or a horrible, I broke one of the God's covenants. I am a fallen, broken person. And that is so damaging to people, because just because you have done something wrong, it doesn't make you a bad person. That's not how we try to think, because all that happens is you go, well, I'm going to expect to do that in the future. I'm going to do this because I am a fool. Like it really sets you up to repeat that behavior that in when we use it as guilt, we go, okay, well, I won't try to do that again. I'll try to be better. I'll try to deal with people better. I'll try to, not miss my appointments. I'll try to, and you try to change and be a better person. With shame, it's like, no, I accept that I'm a terrible person that misses appointments, and it kind of is antithetical to being a better person for that do you know what self-actualization is? Sort of being the best person you can be.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, and sort of, so it's very antithetical to it. So I really dislike the way that Christianity, not all sects, but some of them sort of say, some denominations sort of go, you are broken and failed and miserable and all of these things, and you will
I get
never
into
live
that
up to
too.
Christ,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And it's sort of like, that's really damaging, because what it does is it sort of, and I was talking to Maya about this, Maya Atkinson about this,
Yeah.
that sort of a lot of guys say, oh, I cheat, all guys cheat, kind of thing, to sort of excuse their behavior. And that fallen person thing, I think it's used a lot to excuse people's behavior. Oh yeah, I did this
Kind of
horrible
have.
thing, but you have? Yeah, I think a lot of people have,
Well, I never have.
oh, you never have. Okay, sorry. Well, I think
And
a lot
that's a
of
point of
people
pride for me too. Like I
right.
do like that about myself, that I'm loyal.
Well, I mean, people will make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
But that doesn't. It's kind of like who does it? It's Ray Comfort. He goes, "Have you ever told a lie?
Oh
That makes
yeah.
you a
Yeah.
liar." And it's like, no, it doesn't.
No.
No, it doesn't. It
And
just makes you human.
yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah, so don't internalize. You're not a fool because you said something that was wrong,
Right.
like incorrect. There's no way. Like, you were taught this stuff. I presume you were indoctrinated into the religion, and you were
Heavily.
taught that. Yeah, you were taught that was absolutely correct. You were taught not to question it. You were taught all of these things, and pass that on, believing that you were helping people. That doesn't make you a fool. It just means you were wrong. That's all.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
all. And I was sort of indoctrinated. I mean, there's not a lot of doctrine to it, but I was sort of taught that astrology was accurate, and all of these things you can get out of crystals, and they would change your mood and all this kind of stuff. And so, I would tell people that I did exactly the same thing, but that doesn't make me a fool. It just means that I'm human, and I was taught something that was wrong, that I found out later that was wrong. It's okay. You're not a fool for that.
And that's the dichotomy that, like, I was trying to, like, work out of myself, where, like,
Right,
I
right,
thought I was right, but I was actually just wrong. And well, okay, I was misled. Sure, the things that I were
right.
saying were wrong, but I wasn't intentionally saying them
Correct.
to mislead people. I was
Right.
misled, and that wasn't my fault. Sure,
Correct.
I could have researched it more, but I had trust. Like, I
Mhm.
trusted the people who were teaching me, that they were telling me the married truth.
Yes.
And so I was misled, and so it wasn't that I was wrong and that I'm a fool for being wrong. I was wrong, yes, but I was misled into that error. So it wasn't my fault, and I don't need to blame myself for that. And so that
Correct. Yeah.
relieves the shame, and I don't internalize it, and I let go of it, and I don't feel shame over it, because I'm like, that doesn't have the power over me that it used to have anymore, because I realized that it wasn't, that black or white. It wasn't,
Right.
it wasn't that I was wrong and therefore I was a fool for being wrong. I was misled, and it was just a learning experience. It was a
Mhm.
mistake, and now I've learned better for it.
Yeah, and that's one fallacy, actually, is black and white thinking.
Yeah.
Like, it must be either this or this.
Yeah.
And another false dichotomy I hear a lot is sort of, well, either they, you'll hear an anecdote, somebody had an experience or saw a miracle, sort of thing, and they'll tell you, and you say, well, I don't believe you, and they sort of say, well, either they're telling the truth, or either it happened, or they're lying. And that's
Mhm.
a false dichotomy, because they might be not lying. They might sincerely believe it, right? And it didn't happen. Like, they could be mistaken. They could be, because lying says that you are trying to deceive people, that it's not true. So if I say, if I hear from somebody else, hey, I don't know sports ball, the sports team won the thing on Sunday, kind of thing, and I say
Yeah.
to you, oh, Rodney, this sports team won the thing on Sunday, and then they find out, they said, oh, you lied. I wasn't lying, right? I
Yeah.
wasn't saying, hey, I'm trying to deceive this person, I'll lie about it.
Mhm.
I'm just
Yeah.
mistaken. And that's a false dichotomy where you're either saying, hey, it's either true or I'm lying. No, that's not,
Right.
I think you're mistaken. I think you may have been incorrect about it. I think you might have experienced something, but it's not what you think. There's a million other possibilities that are not, you are lying. So yeah, that's
I had
false dichotomy right there.
I had started a chat with Chat GPT on something like that before.
Nice.
Like who's the liar in this situation?
Right.
And I was like, okay, so oh man, what was the example I gave? I gave I said Timmy tells Sean that Aaron has a new skateboard. And so Sean believes that Aaron has a new skateboard. Sean goes over to Nick's house and tells Nick, hey man, let's go over to what's his name's house and check out his new skateboard, because Tom said that he's got a new skateboard. Aaron's got a new skateboard. So they go over to Aaron's house and like, hey man, where's your new skateboard? He goes, I don't have a new skateboard. And then, Nick is like, well, you said he had a new skateboard. Well, I thought he had a new skateboard because Tom told me he had a new skateboard. And so I asked, I said, who lied?
No one lied.
Exactly.
Yeah, no one lied.
I think Tom would have been maybe mistaken. Maybe he saw Aaron on a skateboard and thought it was a new skateboard.
Right. Or an old skateboard. Yeah.
And told Tom and told Aaron, hey, he's got a new skateboard. And then he goes, tells Nick, and nobody was lying. There was just a circle of misinformation, and it all got cleared up in the end. And ChatGPT kind of stumbled over it a little bit. It's like, oh, well, Tom was lying. I was like, why was Tom lying? They're like, well, Tom started the cycle of misinformation, so Tom would be the liar. I was like, well, I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, don't forget that ChatGPT isn't necessarily a logic engine; it's a language engine. So
it's a fun tool to play with.
Yeah, well, it doesn't get into truth and falsity of statements. It basically just copies the way that the internet talks to each other. It copies language patterns. So it's not even checking the validity of the statements or whether it's necessarily logical or not logical. So it can even get into paradoxes and, we'll just swear that a paradox works kind of thing, because all it's doing is just going through language. And to be honest with you, the first time I realized I was good at logic was when I watched you ever seen the movie The Labyrinth? Really old movie, right? And they had
Jennifer Connelly will always be
absolutely
my celebrity crush,
childhood crush. Jennifer Connelly, absolutely. Way too old for that movie, by the way. Just saying. But they had the two doors, right? Do you remember the two doors? And one of them always tells the truth, and one of them always lies. And my mother didn't get it, and my mother's an incredibly smart woman. Like, she was in Mensa, basically top 3% of intelligence in the world. She didn't get it, and I watched it and got it first time. I understood the logic that she was using. And most people, when you talk to them, they'll say, oh, she got the logic wrong. No, she didn't. She was spot on with that paradox. Absolutely spot on. And you can even demonstrate it in logic gates. She was absolutely.
What was it? Because I'm having a hard time remembering exactly.
Okay.
What the riddle was.
It was. Yeah, so it was two gates, and one of them always told the truth, and one of them always lied. You can ask one question to the gates, right? And you don't know which one lies and which one tells the truth. So you can only ask one question, and you can only ask one of the gates. So what she does is she says, would the other one say that you would tell me this is the way to the center of the labyrinth?
Right.
Okay, so would he say this is the way to the center of the labyrinth?
Okay.
Right. So saw this movie ages ago. I still remember it. So what she knows, and he says yes. And so she goes, well, then this isn't the way to the center of the labyrinth. It's the other one. The reason why is that you're putting your logic through two gates, right? One's going to be a straight line and one's going to be inverted. Okay. So it doesn't matter which one is first, which is which. If you have 0 equals like an inverter and a straight line, 0 will always equal 1 because it's got to go through just say the straight lines first, okay? So it comes out of the straight circuit, 0 equals 0, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes through the inverter and changes it to a 1. Now, if you switch them, you put the inverter first, and you've got a 0, it'll get switched to a 1 and then remain a 1. Right? Yep. So it doesn't matter if you're putting it through 2 gates, one's an inverter of logic and one keeps it straight. It doesn't matter which one is which. It will always flip it to the opposite. Always.
Mm-hmm.
So if the one you're asking is the liar, right? So here's the 2 possibilities. Will the other one say this one leads to the center of the labyrinth? Just say the one you're asking is the liar, mm-hmm. right? And just say she's right and the door is the opposite one. So if the other one's telling the truth, right, he would say, no, that door doesn't lead to the center of the labyrinth because mm-hmm. it's the one you're asking, okay? And the other one is the one that leads to the center of the labyrinth. So the truth teller, the other door, will say, no, your door doesn't lead to the center of the labyrinth, right? But because you're asking the liar, he has to flip it.
Yeah.
Right? So he says, yes, this door will lead. The other guy would say this door leads to the center of the labyrinth. He will lie. Right?
Right.
Now just say it's the door that you're in front of that leads to the center of the labyrinth. Okay? And the 2 guys are exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
So the liar would say, so the one that is telling the truth would say, yes, this door leads to the center of the labyrinth, like the other guy's door leads to the center of the labyrinth. Mm-hmm. And the liar would say the opposite, which is no. So whatever the door you have says, you take the opposite.
Right.
And you will get the correct door. It's a flawless method. It's absolutely flawless. It's perfect. And I understood that at like 12 or so and could explain it.
Right. Because no matter which one if you ask them just straight up, is this the correct door? Both of them are going to say yes. So you have to come up with a way by which one of them would have to say no. And if one of them says yes, then it's the other one.
It's the other one. What you're doing is you're filtering through 2 logic gates. One that's just a straight line and one that's a inverter. We call it an inverter, a NOT gate. Yeah. So when you filter it through both, the outcome is always the same. No matter what order the gates are in, it will always be the same. And that is the inversion of the truth, the inversion of the original signal, because it's going through a straight line and then a NOT gate, a inverted gate kind of.
Then why do people think she got it wrong?
I don't know.
Because she goes down the slide thing after going to.
Okay.
I mean,
here's something to chew on
after that, though. But
here's something to chew on. Jared, the Goblin King, said the other door leads to certain death.
Uh-huh.
Did she go to certain death?
Nope.
Nope. He never said it wasn't booby trapped. That door could have led to the center of the labyrinth. It's just if you avoid the booby trap, you'd get there. But he didn't avoid the booby trap.
Yeah. So, okay.
But it certainly didn't lead to certain death because that was, I think what was that? That was, where'd she go to? She went to some random place.
I think it was right before the stinky swamp.
Yeah.
I forget. I think it was like some kind of like cave system where she again runs into Hoggle.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I understood that at a very early age, and that's basic logic. That's how logic works.
Mm-hmm.
And had to explain it to people, and people never understand it, and I was so frustrated. And that's why probably I was beaten up a lot at school, because I'd go to school and start explaining this stuff really energetically to people, and they would go, "Get away from me, you idiot!"
Like fucking nerd.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I grew up and they made nerds fashionable for some weird reason. I'm not complaining, but what happened? I don't know what happened. That's okay.
Nerdy is the new sexy.
Apparently so.
All right, we'll move
That
into
was
the last leg of this real quick, which is your favorite instances of dealing with logical fallacies. And I guess saying favorite instances is kind of like a tongue-in-cheek way of putting it, but like in your experience, whether even if it's not with in a creationist argument, but just in a argument period, the times where you have encountered a fallacy and you were immediately able to just completely eviscerate it, and I don't know, maybe feel some form of pride or victory through that.
I don't know about pride. I think it's I really liked when what was his name? Was his name Rodney or something? He was some guy debated on Modern Day Debate, and it wasn't so much pride as just it was complete disbelief and amusement as this guy sat there and swore, just basically said every theist is using special pleading, and I'm allowed to use special pleading because God's a special example. And like for a start, the all of the theists in chat were absolutely going nuts, and the comments was like, "How dare you? I'm a theist." And I don't use special pleading, kind of thing, because that's a big fallacy. It's
Right.
basically saying, I think it came up when he said things can't be infinite. And I went, like God? And he's like, no, God can be. And it's like, well, that's special pleading. You're saying things cannot be this thing except for this special example. The true dichotomy is either things can be this thing or they cannot be this thing. So if you say, well, they can't be this thing except for this one thing because of special attributes, that's like textbook special pleading.
Yeah.
But not only did he absolutely confirm that he was doing it and that he had a right to do it, and leaned into it, which, you know, at that point I just sat back and let him talk because it was actually hilarious how like large a hole he's digging for himself. The reason why he could use it, he claimed he could use it, was also special pleading, because everything logic applies to everything except for a God kind of thing. Yeah. Oh, it was absolutely beautiful. And the you know, the amount of theists that were mad at him because they know, you know, even you know, someone who's passingly familiar with sort of philosophy will know that special pleading is not a good thing. It's irrational and illogical, and we can show that it's illogical. You use modal logic, you can show that it's irrational. It doesn't work. So they were mad at him, and it was actually hilarious that, because I tried to give him a bit of wiggle room on these things as well, kind of thing, like give him outs, and you know, I really was trying to help him, and it was funny because you know, like outs, like he said that God was omnipotent, right? And so I'm like, well, omnipotent doesn't work because then you get paradoxes like, is a stone too heavy for a God to lift? Those kind of paradoxes. So I said to him, most theists go for he's maximally powerful. You know, he's as powerful as he can be without breaking logic. And then he's like, well, logic doesn't apply to God. And it's like, okay. So he just didn't, you know, and then afterwards, it was funny because afterwards he kind of blamed his poor performance in the debate on me being on the autism spectrum.
Love it when they go for that, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't do so well because my opponent has a problem.
Right. So it's like, oh, you get stuck on things and things like that. You know, you couldn't move beyond this point. And I'm like, yeah, but the point wasn't well made. You know, you're in a debate. If a point is put out there and there's, you know, that's what I'm here to do. I have to, you know, so, but it was funny because I did get him on record. I like hit record real fast when he started saying all this stuff. So I've actually got that on my channel of him sort of blaming me for the debate kind of thing. It's like,
I think I have a roundabouts example of that. There's this forum site that I frequent.
Well, Darth Dawkins does it all the time.
and it's like there's one section of it has memes, right? And every now and then a religious meme will work its way in. And somebody had said I forget even what the meme was, but I know in the comments there was one guy who was talking about salvation, and that if you deny uh, if you deny the Father, or if you deny God or whatever, then I'm going to deny you. If you deny me before men, then I'll deny you before my Father. That one.
Okay. Yeah.
And he brought that up. I was like, okay, so I used to proclaim that Jesus was Lord, but now I deny him. So he's going to deny me before the Father. He said, no, because you've already accepted him. I said, stop right there, because you didn't give any qualifications.
Correct,
Jesus
yeah.
made an absolute statement. He didn't say except for, he didn't say unless you, he just said, if you deny me before God, before men, then I will deny you before my Father. Period.
Well, I think you can sort of play some interpretive games and say, well, he meant
That's
if you
exactly
ever
what he
denied
did.
me, I will deny you. But a surface reading of the text won't get that out of it.
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
And
No,
that's
I
where
get
he
you.
went to, and that's where he went to was the special interpretations and stuff. And I was like, well, you see, you're gonna pull all this out of there, but it's not there. He straight up says, if this, then this. Flat. There's no wiggle room in that. If you do this thing, then I will do this thing.
Yeah.
So either Jesus is lying, or he wasn't telling the whole truth, which at best just makes him dishonest.
I would agree. Yeah. So, or you can sort of, I guess there's a bit of wiggle room to say, hey, he was misquoted, or it's not it's a mistranslated version, or there's a lot of other things they can say. But you are correct. If somebody gives a logical example like that, it is special pleading to say, well, except in these circumstances, there is an exception to that. It's kind of, I usually don't use logical fallacies that much when just talking to people casually, though. It's a bad idea. You can sort of do other things to, sort of make it out. But I get what you're saying.
Won't recognize them either.
No,
if
not at all.
you use a logical fallacy, most of your everyday person is just going to be like, oh, and it's just
but that's why it's better to use analogy and say, well, that's like if you say, I'm going to, if you misbehave, I'm going to send you to your room, and then saying, well, you misbehaved once ages ago, I'm going to send you to your room now. Why does that make sense? And an average person will understand, that doesn't make sense. So yeah, I don't know. I think that's where you can get around that. But yeah, you're right. It's 2 hours. Time has flown by. Just lastly, what games do you play?
Oh man, let me pull up my Steam here. That's not.
What's your favorite type? What are you playing?
I like open world survival games or crafter builders. Like, let's see. Right now installed, I have Way of the Hunter. It's more of a sim game. But there's this one actually has like story to it, and I do play a lot of single player story driven games. Satisfactory. I have PC Building Simulator, The Witcher 3, Wild Hunt, Valheim. I don't have Subnautica installed right now, but I do play it off and on.
Yeah, good game.
I have all of the Resident Evil games, even the dead ones like Resident Evil Resistance and Reverse. I have a ton of Final Fantasy games. I've got Monster Hunter World, the Middle Earth games, Hogwarts Legacy, the Halo games, God of War, the new one, Generation Zero. I recommend that one heavily because it's a run and gun, humans versus like alien robots, and it's fun. And it's not one of those games it's like really easy to get by either. Like the enemies in it are actually quite tough. So you can't just like run at them, shooting at them and win the fight. You actually have to like hit weak points and if you want to take them down effectively. But yeah, that's just 7 Days to Die, Ark, Yeah, I've
Okay.
I've had a huge spread of them, but those are some of my
Yeah.
favorites.
I do like my survival crafters. At the moment, I'm playing Pal World with
Yep,
Justin,
I've
who was your
watched a
hooligan. He
few
was
of
on
those.
earlier. Yeah, he's insane. I love him. Um, yeah, so that's what it's like. Ark and Pokemon had a baby and then got sued into oblivion by Nintendo.
Oh, did they finally?
No, I don't think so. I think they're
Oh,
gearing
okay.
up now. I wouldn't be surprised. Like I cannot imagine that they won't do a lawsuit. It just seems so
Yeah.
ridiculous from where I'm sitting. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I have no idea.
Mhm,
But yeah, I do like those games. Satisfactory is amazing. Logistics, I
mhm.
do like. Factorio is really good. I do like my roguelikes kind of thing. Like so,
Okay.
Binding of Isaac, I played a little bit.
Yeah.
I do like card games a fair bit. Like the
I
not
haven't
just
gotten into those.
solitaire, but just very like
Like deck
slate.
builders,
Yeah, deck
Slay the
builders like Slay the
Spire.
Spire.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I'll put my gaming channel for anybody that wants it. I don't know. I haven't really been promoting it because I've just been having fun on it, but I feel like maybe I should promote it. Maybe I should, do something with it. So if you do enjoy survival crafting or any other games, and you want to hang out, I'm over there hanging out with Justin and just having a grand old time. So yeah, but actually I do really like strategy as well. So
Mhm.
I get into Stellaris and Crusader Kings and grand strategy. And there's a company called Paradox, which they have no idea how to limit their scope. Their strategy games are like massive. Like a Stellaris is a sort of strategy game about aliens, and you have your different sort of alien nations kind of thing. And the galaxy's like 600 stars and stuff. It's like massive, and it's like, guys, you have no idea about scope. So yeah, but yeah, it's been fantastic talking to you, Rodney. Absolutely
Yeah.
fantastic. That 2 hours just flew by. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it. I hope I got into enough for you without sort of
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
distracting you with all kinds of other talk. I have a habit of doing that. I'm just
No,
going
I
to
love
throw
I
some
love when
tangents.
that happens. I love it.
Okay.
'Cause
Okay.
I
Well,
like
you're in the
I
right
mean,
place.
I like having just an open conversation where everything can just free flow. That's it's more organic. It doesn't feel forced and scripted,
Yeah.
or rigid. You relax. You're just having a conversation with somebody.
Mhm. Well, maybe we can do it again sometime. I can
Oh
maybe come over to your channel, return the
yeah.
favor and come into your house and hang out and chill. Would be cool. I'd really like
Yeah,
it.
I've hit up Billy Bongs a lot as well. I do plan on eventually being able to do kind of like how Doc Dino does, where you watch a video, break down a little
Mm.
bit, watch a video, break down a little bit. I do want to try my hand at that. So I've got a couple of different genres of videos, and so that could be something you could hop on and help me out with.
Um, Robin's got a question for me. Is your guest the person who got mad at me saying cis white men need to do something?
No,
Is
Robin.
that a thing?
I think there was a problem with communication on that one. I wasn't upset.
Okay.
I just uh you'd made a statement, and I thought it was kind of funny because like you said, cis white men need to do something, and I had said, well, I'm a cis white man. I don't need to do anything I don't want to do. And I'm just mostly I was just like, trying to be like, you can't tell me what to do, like
Because
an
I'm a
obstinate
cis white
child.
man. Yeah,
Kind of,
so it's
yeah,
like yeah.
yeah,
At least so you were just joking kind of thing.
yeah, and I think that kind of got lost in translation, because tone isn't discernible through text. So I think there was like a miscommunication there, and that's why I was just like I realized after a couple of back and forth messages that you misinterpreted what I said. So I was like, oh, okay, I should probably drop it because I don't want to make things worse by like continuing to be a goofball and then not be understood to be being a goofball. And so I was just like, okay, I'm going to step away from that because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings or anything.
Yeah, and Boba Sweat talking about Elite Dangerous. Yeah, I have spent a week getting to somewhere in Elite Dangerous. It's absolutely insane. Like if you want to go to the center of their solar, they've got basically an accurate map of the Milky Way. with Sagittarius A being the black hole in the center. It is insanely large. Yeah, I will acknowledge that, Booba Sweat. I acknowledge that. They have no idea what scope is. Well, Robin, that's up to you. Not a problem. But yeah, I'll, thank you for explaining that. I really appreciate it. But I thank you so much for coming on. I've actually had a blast. So I've really enjoyed it. Look, I've made any number of jokes that have not landed properly. And I'm, my problem is I can't tell often enough when people are actually angry or upset at me. And I blithely carry on with no idea that people I was saying to Kentucky Atheist last night that once I was talking to somebody about sort of things, and I didn't realize I was in a furious argument because I just didn't realize they were angry until they exploded at me, and I was like, where did that come from? And everyone's like, are you serious? He's been building up for 5 minutes now. And I'm like, I didn't notice, yeah no problem at all. Okay, fantastic. Fantastic. Okay, well, I think we'll call it there. Don't forget, everybody, to be kind to yourself. Be very gentle with yourself, especially in these really hard times, and be kind to everybody else. And much love to everybody. Thank you so much to Rodney. Actually, I better play my banners just quickly because I forgot to do that. And I also need to do some outro music, but that's okay. Rodney, tell me what you're up to. Tell me what you've got going on. What can we expect from you?
I've been in emails with Grayson. I do want to get Grayson on, talk with Grayson about fossils. He did the thing on transitional fossils stuff, and I thought that was really awesome. And so I kind of want to break down a little bit of that with him. I've been trying and continuing to try because to get Erica from Guts and Gibbon on. She's unbelievably busy. She gets tons and tons of emails, and I get it. So it's been a work. Trying to communicate with her, but I completely understand. But so far, I do have videos coming out every Wednesday still on the 21 reasons why the flood of Noah never happened. Until we get to part 21. And spoilers for everybody in Mark Reid's chat, there will be a number 22 video on other things that preclude the flood that aren't covered in the list. And I'm not going to break them down like I do in the other videos. I'm going to go over them real quick, be like, this is what it is, this is why it precludes it, this is what, and but that, and then I'm hesitant about jumping on anything to do with Kent Hovind because I don't want that kind of heat coming to my channel, and I definitely don't want Kent trying to call my name for any reason. But against my better judgment, I am going to do the 4 questions every religion tries to answer, and I'm going to try and jump further into those than they deserve to be jumped into, because you can dismiss them on surface level, because it may shock you to find out that Kent doesn't actually answer those questions in light of creation, but he does give an answer on behalf of the atheists who are not present.
I think that they do a lot of that stuff. I mean, I once saw them. Who was it? It was David McQueen dress up as Darwin and answer questions on his behalf to Donnie on that channel. I mean, it was just so cringe. I could have fallen over and died of cringe. It was terrible, but that's okay. I mean, they're doing their thing over there. It's fine. But thank you so much, Rodney. I will look forward to the 4 questions, and I hope you have a fantastic day. But definitely be in touch. I liked hanging out. It was really fun. So hopefully we can get together and do another one at some point. Would be fantastic.
Yeah, we tend to be in a lot of the same chats, so we'll probably run into each other soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, take care, everybody, and I will see you in the next one.
Bye.
Oh, hang on. I've got to set up a redirect. I always forget something. Like, there's always one thing I'll forget. I'll either forget to, redirect, or I'll forget my banners, or I'll forget to, thank the guest and cut them off, or I'll forget something. Absolutely something. What am I doing? Where am I? Who are you? What am I doing? Okay. Who's live? Is Bad Science still going? If I can get Bad Science, I'll send you over there, peeps. just because I love you. There we go. Yeah. They're still going. Okay. Save and take care, everybody. Say hi to Maya for me. She's awesome. Bye-bye.